Hello, welcome everyone. Look at this, where we are. We're out in nature. The ocean's that way. It's the deeper blue part over there. Let me see where the sun is. Right above me. Here. All right, so today we're going back into Sir Gibbie, this amazing book from the 1800s that George MacDonald wrote. George MacDonald was the spiritual mentor of C.S. Lewis. We've got Leia with us. Hold on. Let's give her her cameo. There she is. Lele. All right, so I think I got her on. And so don't worry if you're just returning to the book or if you haven't had any of it yet. It's about this amazing young man who is following the path of life, just like each of us. And he you know how we each have the difficulties we face. Well, his is being mute. And so the main character of this story, but you don't notice sometimes that he is mute because spiritually he's very aware and sensitive, lots more than most people. And so what I was saying was George MacDonald, C.S. Lewis considered George MacDonald a spiritual mentor. So this is a book from the 1800s. And I just do this. My name's Dr. Cheryl Meyer. I'm a psychologist in my day job. And I love reading these books anyway. And so I take the time to read them for us. And so let's get back into it. So yeah, C.S. Lewis said every book that he ever wrote, he quoted George MacDonald either directly or indirectly. All right, I didn't tie Leia's leash to anything, but I think we'll sit this way. We're returning to this old bench. Often I go to the top where we see the ocean for sure, but today I was up in LA. I had to take someone to the airport, and so I got back, and I have just enough time right now to read for us. So let's get in. What I do, so that you know, is for next time is once I start the book, I kind of do this so that people can fast forward to this part if they see it, like action. If they're following the playlist, there's a playlist for this. So welcome. I hope the wind's all right. This is chapter 32, and it's called the prologue again. So we must be entering into a new section of the story. All right, so sometimes I'll put the book back here to block the wind, if I can see it from that far away. Ever since he became a dweller in the air of Glashgar, because he sort of was adopted by here, let me see if I can make this a little brighter, because I'm sort of in the dark here. All right, so he was adopted by these people, Janet and Robert. They lived as like a shepherd on the mountain. They had some sheep to care for the land, and they took in Gibbie. Anyway, you can listen to the last part, but I always say just trust that you're here for a reason, and some awesome reason, because this is the most amazing, transformative book. It just informs our own life. But anyway, I'll go. Ever since he became a dweller in the air of Glashgar, Gibbie, mindful of his first visit thereto, and of his grand experience on that occasion, had been in the habit, as often as he saw reason, to expect a thunderstorm, and his duties would permit, of ascending the mountain, and there on the crest of the granite peak, awaiting the arrival of the tumult. Everything antagonistic in the boy, everything that could naturally find relief or pleasure or simple outcome in resistance or contention, debarred as it was by the exuberance of his loving kindness from obtaining satisfaction or alleviation in strife with his fellows, found it wherever he could encounter the forces of nature, in personal wrestle with them where possible, and always in wildest sympathy with any uproar of the elements. The absence of personality in them allowed the coexistence of sympathy and antagonism in respect of them, except those truths awaking delight at once calm and profound, of which so few know the power, and the direct influence of human relation. Gibbie's emotional joy was more stirred by storm than by anything else. All right, let me see. Hi, I have it. You can go.
No.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So bikers come through here. It's like a hidden spot, sort of. Oops, I better make sure that I have Leia's leash. All right, let's do this, because then I get the sunlight on my face. Sunlight on my face. All right. And then the bikers can, anyway. Except those truths awaking delight at once, and calm and profound, of which so few know the power and the direct influence of human relation, Gibbie's emotional joy was more stirred by storm than by anything else. And with all forms of it, he was so familiar that, young as he was, he had unconsciously begun to generalize on its phases. Towards the evening of a wondrously fine day in the beginning of August, a perfect day of summer, in her matronly beauty, it began to rain. August rains, okay. All the next day, the slopes and stairs of Glashgar were alternately glowing in sunshine and swept with heavy showers, driven, slanting, and in strong gusts of wind from the northwest. How often he was wet through and dried again that day, Gibbie could not have told. He wore so little that either took but for a few moments, and he was already ready for a change. The wind and the rain together were cold, but that only served to let the sun shine deeper into him when it returned. Oh, that's awesome. In the afternoon, there was less sun, more rain, and more wind, and at last the sun seemed to give it up. The wind grew to a hurricane, and the rain strove with it, which should inhabit the space. The whole upper region was like a huge mortar, in which the wind was the pestle, and with innumerable gyres. How do you say that? Gyres, however you say that. You know, like a gyroscope, or anyway, moving. Vainly ground at the rain, Gibbie drove his sheep to the refuge of a pen on the lower slope of a valley. Oops. Hold on, that ran oops, not that low. Sorry, it's a little different setup today, so that's what I say always to myself and to my kids. You get what you get. Don't throw a fit. All right, we get this awesome, amazing story. You know, anyway, if you don't get it, I hope you get it. He's like describing our inner world as well. I don't want to tell everything. I want us to hold on. It's uncomfortable. There we go. Okay, blocking the wind as well. So the side of the enclosure where they were sheltered by a rock behind, forming one side of the enclosure, and the dikes of loose stones forming the others, at a height there was no tradition of any flood having reached. He then went home, and having told Robert what he had done and had his supper, set out in the early failing light to ascend the mountain. A great thunderstorm was at hand and was calling him. It was almost dark before he reached the top, but he knew the surface of Glashgar nearly as well as the floor of the cottage. Just as he had fought his way to the crest of the peak in the face of one of the fiercest of the blasts abroad that night, a sudden rush of fire made the heavens like the smoke-filled vault of an oven, and at once the thunder followed in a succession of single sharp explosions. Hi! Without any roll between. The mountain shook with the windy shocks, but the first of the thunderstorm was the worst, and it soon passed. I hope you're well, by the way. God bless each of us. God, speak to us, speak to our hearts and our minds and our wills and in our actions. Help us be informed by this story and just enter it in with joy and be in this present moment and let go of all of our problems and worries and concerns and help us know that you called us to this place, to this moment with you, with this author, with George MacDonald, who expressed you and your love so well, Lord. Thank you for this moment, we pray. We welcome all people in Jesus' name, amen. All right, we welcome all people. Don't worry if I pray and say Jesus' name. Oh, 3 butterflies. Or something like that. Look, that hawk. I think it's a hawk. I don't think that one's a crow. All right. So all right, hold on. Just as he had fought his way to the crest of the peak in the face of one of the fiercest of the blasts abroad that night, a sudden rush of fire made the heaven like the smoke-filled vault of an oven. Lightning, right? And at once the thunder followed in a succession of single sharp explosions, without any roll between. The mountain shook with windy shocks, but the first of the thunderstorm was the worst, and it soon passed. The wind and the rain continued, and the darkness was filled with the rush of water everywhere, wildly tearing down the sides of the mountain. Thus heaven and earth held communication in torrents all night. Down the steeps of the limpid air, they ran to the hard sides of the hills, where at once, as if they were no longer at home and did not like the change, they began to work mischief. To the ears and heart of Gibbie, their noises were a mass of broken music. Every spring and autumn, the floods came, and he knew them, and they were welcome to him in their seasons. It required some care to find his way down through the darkness and the waters to the cottage, but as he was neither in fear nor in haste, he was in little danger, and his hands and feet could pick out the path where his eyes were useless. When at length he reached his bed, it was not for a long time to sleep, but to lie awake and listen to the raging of the wind all about and above and below the cottage, and the rushing of the streams down past it on every side. To his imagination, it was as if he lay in the very bed of the channel by which the waters of heaven were shooting to the valleys of the earth. And when he fell asleep at last, his dream was of the rush of the river of the water of life from under the throne of God. I know a man who said, he died on the operating table and went to heaven, and he talks about this river of life that he saw in heaven. Anyway, I talk about him in some of my other videos. I won't mention his name here. But he's prayed for me, and I've met him, and it's just like all of us. We each experience God in a unique way. So his dream was of the rush of the river of the water of life from under the throne of God. Jesus said we have the water of life flowing in us. The Holy Spirit will. It says, I am the living water, drink of me. And waters of living water will flow out of us, springs of living water. It's in John. And he saw men drink thereof, and everyone, as he drank, straightway, in this dream, vision he's seen, as he drank, straightway knew that he was one with the Father, and one with every child of his throughout the infinite universe. Right? When they drank, I'm going to read that part of the sentence again. All right. To his imagination, it was as if he lay in the very bed of the channel by which the waters of heaven were shooting to the valleys of the earth. And when he fell asleep at last, his dream was of the rush of the river of the water of life from under the throne of God. And he saw men and women, drink thereof, and everyone as he or she drank straightway knew that he or she was one with the Father and one with every child of his throughout the infinite universe. He woke, and what remained of his dream was love in his heart, and in his ears the sound of many waters. Wow. It was morning. He rose and, dressing hastily, opened the door. What a picture of grey storm rose outspread before him. The wind fiercely invaded the cottage, thick charged with water drops. And stepping out, he shut the door in haste, lest it should blow open the old people in bed, blow upon the old people in bed and wake them. He could not see far on any side for the rain that fell and the mist and steam that rose, upon which the wind seemed to have no power. But wherever he did see, there water was running down. Up the mountain he went. He could hardly have told why. Once for a moment, as he ascended, the veil of the vapor either rose or was torn asunder, and he saw the great wet gleam of the world below. By the time he reached the top, it was as light as it was all the day, but it was with a dull yellow glare, as if the sun were obscured by the smoke and vaporous fumes of a burning world which the rain had been sent to quench. It was a wild, hopeless scene, as if God had turned his face away from the world, and all nature was therefore drowned in tears. No Rachel weeping for her children, but the whole creation crying for the Father and refusing to be comforted. Gibbie stood gazing and thinking, did God like to look at the storm he made? If Jesus did, would he have left it all and gone to sleep when the wind and waves were howling and flinging the boat about like a toy between them? He must have been tired, surely. With what? Because Jesus fell asleep on the boat while it was, the disciples were like, wake up, we're drowning, we're not going to be alive soon if you don't help us. And he's like, be at peace to the water, whatever. Anyway, I recommend the story if you haven't looked it up. He slept in the midst of a right splendid storm, and upon that Gibbie remembered what St Matthew says just before he tells about the storm, that, quote, he cast out the spirits with his word and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah, I think, the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. He took on our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. I think Isaiah says this. Isaiah 54, possibly. Anyway, that moment it seemed as if he must be himself in some wave-tossed boat and not upon a mountain of stone, for Glashgar gave a great heave under him, then rocked and shook from side to side a little, and settled down so still and steady that motion and the mountain seemed again two ideas that never could be present together in any mind. The next instant came an explosion, followed by a frightful roaring and hurling, as of mingled water and stones, and on the side of the mountain beneath him he saw what, through the mist, looked like a cloud of smoke or dust rising to a height. He darted towards it. As he drew nearer, the cloud seemed to condense, and presently he saw plainly enough that it was a great column of water shooting up and out from the face of the mountain. It sank and rose again with alternation of a huge pulse. The mountain was cracked, and through the crack, with every throb of its heart, the lifeblood of the great hull of the world seemed beating out. Already it had scattered masses of gravel on all sides, and down the hill a river was shooting in sheer cataract, raving and tearing, and carrying stones and rocks with it like foam. Still and still it pulsed and rushed and ran, born like another Xanthus, a river full grown, from the heart of the mountain. Suddenly Gibbie, in the midst of his astonishment and awful delight, noted the path of the new stream, and from his knowledge of the face of the mountain perceived that its course was direct for the cottage. Down the hill he shot after it, as if it were a wild beast that his fault had freed from its cage. He was not terrified, one believing like him in the perfect love and perfect will of a Father of men, as the fact of facts, fears nothing. Fear is faithlessness. But there is so little that is worthy of the name of faith that such a confidence will appear to most not merely incredible but heartless. The Lord himself seems not to have been very hopeful about us, for he said, "When the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?" God give us faith. A perfect faith would lift us absolutely above fear. It is in the cracks, crannies, and gulfy faults of our belief, the gaps that are not faith, that the snow of apprehension settles and the ice of unkindness forms. If we have a good God, why would we ever be unkind? Because we need nothing from other people. They can give good gifts, but if they don't, we have a kind Father who's, the earth is the Lord's and all that therein is. Anyway, the torrent had already worn for itself a channel. What earth there was, it had swept clean away to the rock, and the loose stones it had thrown up aside or hurled with it in its headlong course. But as Gibbie bounded along, following it with a speed almost equal to his own, he was checked in the midst of his hearty haste by the sight, a few yards away, of another like terror, another torrent issuing from the side of the hill and rushing to swell the valley stream. Another and another he saw with growing wonder as he ran. Before he reached home, he passed some 6 or 8, and had begun to think whether a second deluge of the whole world might not be at hand, another flood, commencing this time with Scotland. Right, they're in Scotland. 2 of them joined the one he was following, and he had to cross them as he could. The others he saw near and further off, one foaming deliverance after another, issuing from the entrails of the mountain like imprisoned demons that, broken from their bonds, ran to ravage the world with accumulated hate of dreariest centuries. Now and then a huge boulder, loosed from its bed by the trail of this or that watery serpent, would go rolling, leaping, bounding down the hill before him, and just in time he escaped one that came springing after him, as if it were a living thing that wanted to devour him. Right, just in time. Nor was Glashgar the only torrent-bearing mountain of Gormgarnet that day. Though the rain prevented Gibbie from seeing anything of what the rest of them were doing, the fountains of the great deep were broken up and seemed rushing together to drown the world. And still, the wind was raging and the rain tumbling to the earth, rather in sheets than in streams. Gibbie at length forsook the bank of the new torrent to take the nearest way home, and soon reached the point whence, first returning to that direction, he always looked to see the cottage. For a moment he was utterly bewildered. No cottage was to be seen. From the top of the rock against which it was built shot the whole mass of the water he had been pursuing, now dark with stones and gravel, now grey with foam or glassy in the lurid light. "Oh, Jesus Christ!" he cried, and darted to the place. When he came nearer, to his amazement, there stood the little house, unharmed, the very center of the cataract. For a few yards on the top of the rock, that was like a prayer, just so you know, The torrent had a nearly horizontal channel along which it rushed with unabated speed to the edge and then shot clean over the cottage, dropping only a dribble of rain on the roof from the underside of its half-arch. The garden ground was gone, swept clean from the bare rock, which made a fine smooth chute for the water a long distance in front. He darted through the drizzle and spray, reached the door, and lifted the hatch. The same moment he heard Janet's voice in joyful greeting. No, come away, laddie, she said. What would have ye thought? Would you have to lean on the rock to win out the water? Yeah, the rock would block out the water. Who would thought of that? Come, Robert, we'll all... wait. We're but waiting for you to go on down. Come, Robert, we'll all go down the hill. She stood in the middle of the room in her best gown, as if she had been going to church, her Bible, a good-sized octave under her arm, with white handkerchief folded round it, and her umbrella in her hand. He that believeth shall not make haste, she said. But he must not tempt the Lord either. Don't tempt the Lord in such a situation, right? Drink that milk, Gibbie, and put a bannock of yours in your pouch, and come away. Robert rose from the edge of the bed, staff in hand, ready too. He also was in his Sunday clothes. Oscar, who could make no change of attire, but was always ready, that's their dog, right? And had been standing, looking up. It's such a beautiful day. In his face for the last 10 minutes, wagged his tail when he saw him rise and got out of his way. On the table were the remains of their breakfast of oat cake and milk. Fire Janet had left on the hearth was a spongy mass of peat, as wet as the winter before it was dug from the bog, so they had no porridge. The water kept coming in splashes down the loom. The hillocks of the floor were slimy, and in the hollows little lakes were gathering. The lowest film of the torrent water ran down the rock behind, and making its way between rock and roof, threatened soon to render the place uninhabitable. What's the ease of loading yourself with the umbrella, said Robert. You'll get it drenched. Drook it, he says, but it says drenched in parentheses. Oh, I'll just take it, replied Janet with a laugh, in acknowledgement of her husband's fun. It'll hold the rain, or blind me or something. They speak in the Scottish brogue, so let me show it to you so you can translate it for us if you know how, and I'll just do my best. I put in the description someone that did translate all of this for us, so if you want to read that more, you can purchase their book. I'm not trying to sell anything, I just wanted people to know. Anyway, that's going to be able to hold it up, and the wind will be sore upon it. I'm thinking though it'll be more something to keep you dry. Janet smiled and made no denial. No, Gibbie, she said, we're going to lose a loose Crummy. Crummy is their cow, but you'll have to lead her. She wouldn't be a cow in this place with no roof before her. Where do you think you're going? Asked Robert, who, satisfied as usual with whatever might be in his wife's mind, had not till this moment thought of asking her where she meant to take refuge. Oh, we'll just make for the mains, given you be agreeable. You be agreeable, Robert. Anyway, her son Donald works at the farm called the Mains, this Main farm, and she's friends with him. We'll make for the Mains. Don't you be agreeable, Robert, she answered. It's there we belong till in the weather like this, nobody would refuse to a beggar, not to say Mistress Jean, to her own folks. With that, she led the way to the door and opened it. His voice was like the sound of many waters, she said to herself softly. I was thinking of that verse earlier. That's in the Psalms or somewhere in the prophets. As the liquid thunder of the torrent came in the louder, Gibbie shot round the corner of the byre, went through all the roar. Every now and then they had heard the cavernous mooing of Crummy, piteous and low. He had found a stream a foot deep running between her fore and hind legs, and did not wonder that she wanted to be on the move. Speedily, he loosed her and fastened the chain tether to her halter, let her out. She was terrified at sight of the falling water, and they had some trouble in getting her through behind it. But presently after, she was making the descent as carefully and successfully as any of them, because they're old, you know. It was a heavy undertaking for the two old folk to walk all the way to the mains, and in such a state of the elements. Okay, what happened to the sheep, I wonder, right? I think we'll find out. But where there is no choice, we do well to make no difficulty, right? Janet was half troubled that her mountain and her foundation on the rock should have failed her, but consoled herself that they were but shadows of heavenly things and figures of the true, and that a mountain of rock was in itself no more to be trusted than a horse or a prince or the legs of a man. Robert plodded on in contented silence, and Gibbie was in great glee, singing after his fashion. You know, he could hum, you know, make noises like that all the way, though now and then half choked by the fierceness of the wind, round some corner of rock filled with raindrops that stung like hailstones. By and by, Janet stopped and began looking about her. See, they don't even know if their house is going to be left. They just left everything they had, right? This naturally seemed to her husband rather odd in this circumstance. "What are you after, Janet?" he said, shouting through the wind from a few yards off, by no means sorry to stand for a moment, although any recovering of his breath seemed almost hopeless in such a tempest. "I want to lay my umbrella in safety," answered Janet. I wish I could, but perceive a suitable spot." "You was right, Robert. It's more problem, basically, nor can I get the good of it." "Hoots! Fling it free then, lass," he returned. "Is this a day to be thinking of your gear, you know, something?" "Oh, what for no, Robert," she rejoined. "A day's as good as another for thinking about anything the rich got." I think she's saying that, or the right that you know, that you're a steward of, basically. I don't know. "What?" retorted Robert. "When we have taken our lives in our hands and can no more than hope that we may carry them through safe." "What's that's come over our lives, Robert? The master never made muckle of saving such as likes them." Like he's gonna save us, right? "It seems to me they're nothing but kind of world's gear themselves. Anyway." "And yet," argued Robert, "you'll take thought about an old umbrella. Where's your constancy, lass?" I don't know. I think they're saying God's going to take care of them. "If I were troubled about my life," said Janet, "I could ill spare the thought for an old umbrella." So she's not troubled about her life. "But they both trouble me a little, and I may just as well look after each of them both." It's old and casting a bow ribbit. I don't know what a bow ribbit is anyway. It's true, but it'll become to drop without thought. Anyway, something about make hail loaves said, "Gather up the fragments, let nothing be lost." Okay, so when Jesus made, he broke the bread and gave lots of people loaves. He had the 12 disciples go, and they picked up 12 basketfuls of fragments of bread, you know, so they each had one to carry, so they couldn't deny the miracle that had happened later when, you know, difficulties arose in their life. They remembered picking up those baskets, among other things. But you know, she's saying, Jesus said, "Gather up the fragments, let nothing be lost." That, you know, anyway, that's some kind of deep principle for our lives as well. And so she's like, "Of course I'm going to not throw away this umbrella as well." She continued, still looking about her. "I must just do my duty by the old umbrella, and come of it as it likes. Karina, I don't know what Karina is, but anyway." So saying, she walked to the lee side of a rock and laid the umbrella close under it, then a few large stones upon it to keep it down. I may add that the same umbrella recovered and with 2 new ribs served Janet to the day of her death. Oh, wow. So maybe she got it repaired at one time. Anyway, whoa. The next chapter is chapter 33, the Mains. All right. They reached at length the valley road. The water that ran in the bottom was the Lorry. 3 days ago, it was a lively little stream, winding and changing within its grassy banks, here resting silent in a deep pool, there running and singing over its pebbles. Now it had filled and far overflowed its banks, and was a swift river. It had not yet, so far up the valley, encroached on the road, but the torrents on the mountain had already in places much injured it, and with considerable difficulty they crossed some of the new-made gullies. When they approached the bridge, however, by which they must cross the Lorry to reach the Mains, their worst trouble lay before them, for the enemy, with whose reinforcements they had all the time been descending, showed himself ever in greater strength the farther they advanced, and here the road was flooded for a long way on both sides of the bridge. There was therefore a good deal of wading to be done, but the road was an embankment. There was little current, and in safety at last they ascended the rising ground on which the farm building stood. When they reached the yard, they sent Gibbie to find shelter for Crummy, and themselves went up to the house. "The Lord preserve us," cried Jean Maver, with uplifted hands when she saw them enter the kitchen. "He'll do that, ma'am," returned Janet with a smile. "But what can he do? Giving you be drowned on the hills with what's to come, and how? I would know that," said Jean. "The water's not up to your door yet," remarked Janet, right? Don't be predicting negative. We don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. Like, how did we know? You know, that like the ocean was going to be right over there, and the eagle with the hawk was going to be flying, and the wind blowing, and I'm going to get my water. Good girl. Look at Leia. I don't know if you can see her. She's just resting underneath the shade. Because it's the afternoon now, not the morning. All right, 1 second. I don't have a pause button, so you're going to have to bear with me. Someone gave me a bottle of water. It's like a metal thing. Whoops. I see the dust cloud disappear. Not yet, Leia. Oh, you want some water? Okay, hold on. Without a trace. So they're down to the Mains. Let me see if I can tell you something else about. She's like, "Oh, we're getting water out? I'll take some." Because she knows I have this little bowl of hers that pops out. Just a second, Leia. Are you thirsty? We didn't walk that much, girl. Let me pour a little in her bowl. Just a second, Leia. Whoops. Mine fell. She can have mine if she runs out of hers. Good girl. Hold on. I don't want to get water on this 1800s book. Okay. So, the water's not up to your door yet, remarked Jenny. God forbid, retorted Jean, as if the very moment of such a state of things were too dreadful to be polite. But you're wet. Wet's not the word, said Robert, trying to laugh, but failing from sheer exhaustion and the beginnings of an asthmatic attack. So he has asthma, and they were soaked through and through, I'm sure. The farmer, hearing their voices, came into the kitchen, a middle-sized and middle-aged, rather coarse-looking man with keen eyes who took snuff amazingly. His manner was free, with a touch of satire. He was proud of driving a hard bargain, but... was thoroughly hospitable. He had little respect for person or thing, but showed an occasional touch of tenderness. "Hoot, Rob," he said roughly as he entered. "I thought you had more sense. What's brought you here at such a time?" But as he spoke, he held out his snuff box to the old man. Fell necessity, sir." Robert, taking a good pinch. "Necessity," retorted the farmer. "Was you out of meal?" Like, are you out of food or something, right? I don't know. Hold on. Let me get the camera back over me so I can put my legs up on the bench. "Out of dry meal, I doubt, by this time, sir," replied Robert. "Hoots, it was more like necessity well upon the hill instead down here the river meadow. I don't know. It's just clean ridiculous. You should have known better at your age, Rob. You should have thought twice, man." I don't know if he's being funny. We'll see. Indeed, sir," answered Robert quietly, finishing his pinch of snuff. "There was small need and less time to think, and Glashgar burst in at the water coming over the top of the bit. It overshot the wheel, and no place for folk to just stay in, right? You don't think Janet and me would be fools as put on our Sunday clothes to swim in them if we thought we'd see things the way we left them. With the good book, so they brought their Bible and their best clothes, because that might be that all they had after this, just the clothes on their back, right? Anyway, he thought to see things as we left them when we got back. You see, sir, though the house is up upon the rock, the foundations. Anyway, he doesn't know how the water's going to come down and take it down or not. Anyway, I, said Janet in a low voice, the live stains must come down the live rocks to big the house. Anyway, she'll stand. She says she thinks the house will stand. What do you think, Master Fergus? Are you going to be a minister? Said Robert, referring to his wife's words, as the young man looked in the door of the kitchen. Let him be, interposed his father, blowing his nose with unnecessary violence. Set him preaching. Don't set him preaching before it's time, right? Fetch the whiskey, Fergus, and get old Robert a dram. Because it's like medicine back then. He's not trying to give him a bunch of whiskey, but to warm him up. But anyway, it was time to flit. So they put 2 or 3 glasses. Fergus, we had a need of something that's not water. It's perfectly ridiculous. Anyway, because there's so much water, I think. Having taken a little of the whiskey, the old people went to change their clothes for some Jean had provided. And in the meantime, she made up her fire and prepared some breakfast for them. And where's your dummy? They call Curdy that sometimes. She asked as they re-entered the kitchen, but she's not trying to be mean. They just mean he's not deaf, but he's not able to speak. So they would call that dumb. When someone's deaf and dumb, but he's not dumb at all in his mind. Anyway, he had poor Crummy to look after, answered Janet, but he might have been here by this time. He'll be with Donald then in the bar, no doubt, said Jean. He's some shy coming in wanting an invite. He needs an invite because he used to help out in that house and they thought he was like a fairy or something. It's a fun story at the beginning. Anyway, she went to the door and called with a loud voice across the yard, through the wind and the clashing torrents, "Donald, send Dummy in till there's breakfast." "He's off to the sheep," cried Donald in reply. "Oh, preserve us." "The creature will be lost," said Jean. "Less likely nor any man about this place," bawled Donald, half angry with his mistress for calling his friend Dummy. He doesn't like her calling him that. "Gibbie knows better what he's about, and is not a fool, because he can look after stuff that other people of nonsense cannot." Anyway, he's more wise than most people he's ever met. Anyway, Jean went back to the kitchen, only half reassured concerning her brownie, and far from contented with his absence. But she was glad to find that neither Janet nor Robert appeared alarmed at the news. "I wish the creature had had some breakfast," she said. "He had a piece in his pouch, of oat cake, right?" answered Janet. He's not left without being provided for, right? Something like that. "And what can be made more of?" "I don't rightly understand you there," said Jean. "You cannot have failed to remark, ma'am," answered Janet, "at when the master said himself to feed the hungry 1,000, he would take in his hands what there was, and he would make more of it. He would break it and make more of it, right? Jesus would do that for the people that were hungry. So as it was, he hanged what he did upon something his father had done for him, and was managed wanting only." Anyway, basically, she's like, God is going to take care of Gibbie on the mountain. Oh no, answered Janet. "Only while the spirit and Spirin gets the upper hand of me for a season. So something about conundrums. Anyway, I doubt the same spirit will lead us far from the still waters some day, Janet." And Jean, stirring the porridge vehemently. "Oh, I think not," answered Janet very calmly. "When the master says, 'What's that to thee?' I take care he doesn't have to say it twice to me. Jesus says, don't worry about anything." And, anyway. But just get up and follow him. This was beyond Jean, but she held her peace, for though she feared for Janet's orthodoxy and had a strong opinion of the superiority of her own common sense, in which, as in the case of all who pride themselves in the same, there was a good deal more of the common than of the sense. Wow. There's a hawk just went over us. Maybe he'll circle back around, right over us. There's more of the common than the sense, actually, what he's saying. She had the deepest conviction of Janet's goodness and regarded her as a sort of heaven-favored idiot. People do that sometimes. They don't recognize when you're sensitive to the Holy Spirit or to the Spirit of God. They think you're an idiot because you don't go by the common sense of this world. I just experienced that quite a lot yesterday. I won't say where I was, but anyway. And regarded her as a sort of heaven-favored idiot whose utterances were somewhat privileged. Janet, for her part, looked upon Jean as an honest woman who will get a heap of light someday. When they had eaten their breakfast, Robert took his pipe to the barn, saying there was not much danger of fire that day, because all the water, right? Because you don't want to smoke around the hay. But anyway, Janet washed up the dishes and sat down to her book, the capital book, with the capital B for the book, the Bible. And Jean went out and in, attending to many things. Meantime, the rain fell, the wind blew, the water rose. Little could be done beyond feeding the animals, threshing a little corn in the barn, and twisting straw ropes. Hello.
Hi.
Enjoy your walk.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, and so, twisting straw ropes for the thatch of the ricks of the coming harvest, so you have to wrap up the coming harvest with these ropes that you make, so you can do that on a rainy day. If indeed there was a harvest on the road, for as the day went on, it seemed almost to grow doubtful whether any ropes would be wanted, while already not a few of last year's ricks from farther up the country were floating past the mains down the Dower to the sea. The sight was a dreadful one, had an air of the day of judgment about it to farmers' eyes. From the mains to right and left, beyond the rising ground on which the farm building stood, everywhere as far as the bases of the hills, instead of fields, was water, yellow, brown here in still expanse and slow progress, there sweeping along in fierce current. The quieter parts of it were dotted with trees divided by hedges, shaded with ears of corn. Upon the swifter parts floated objects of all kinds. Mr. Duff went wandering restlessly from one spot to another, finding nothing to do. In the gloaming, which fell the sooner that a rain blanket... Leia? Okay, hold on. Miles, from the mains to the right, left beyond the rising ground on which the farm building stood, everywhere. Okay, we already did that. Mr. Duff, wandering restlessly from one spot to another, finding nothing to do, in the gloaming which fell to the sooner than a rain blanket, miles thick, wrapped the earth up from the sun, he came across from the barn and, entering the kitchen, dropped weary with hopelessness on a chair. I can well understand, he said, what for the Lord said, son Bonnie sent up a Louis, but what for he said the corn grow. Anyway, I think he's saying, like, why would all this corn grow if he doesn't get to get to harvest it? Hold your tongue, Janet. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm saying nothing but some truth. I cannot see the what for of it. I cannot see the good of it to anybody. Anything on the road to the German Ocean. And the land's just melting away into the sea. But so, because I don't know what, if she was going to say God will still provide, or I don't know why I said this, but Janet sat silent, knitting hard at a stocking she had got hold of, then that Jean had begun for her brother. She knew argument concerning the use of adversity was vain with a man who knew not of life, but that which consisted in eating and drinking, sleeping and rising, working and getting on in the world, as to such things existing only that they may subserve a real life. He was almost as ignorant. So he was thinking he was in the real life, but she's thinking about our real life is our eternal life, right? Just like I get my nails done, they're all sparkly, like our inner soul essence. George MacDonald said in another book, don't teach your children they have a soul. Teach them they are a soul and have a body. I love that. Anyway, he was almost as ignorant, notwithstanding he was an elder of the church as any heathen. So he was an elder of the church, but just as almost as ignorant as any heathen was of our deeper life, right? From being nearly in the center of its own land, the farm setting of the Mains was at a considerable distance from any other, but there were 2 or 3 cottages upon the land, and as the evening drew on, another aged pair who lived in one only a few hundred yards from the house made their appearance and were soon followed by the wife of the foreman with her children who lived farther off. Quickly the night closed in and Gibbie was not come. Robert was growing uneasy. Janet kept comforting and reassuring him. There's the thing, said the old man. Oscar's with him. I, responded Janet, unwilling in the hearing of others to say a word that might seem to savor of rebuke to her husband. She's not going to put her husband down, in front of other people. Yet pained that he should look to the dog for comfort, right? When God is, hi. Good, how are you? when God is with him, like he's thinking, oh, the dog will help protect him. And it's like, well, he's got God and the dog, right? And so anyway, that he should go the dog for comfort. He's a well-made animal, Oscar. There's been lots of sheep carrying by that one, You see him that made him, right? She's saying that made him, being a shepherd himself, knows how to wait on the dog and the boy, right? None but her husband understood what lay behind the words. Oscar's not with them, said Donald. The dog came to me in the barn long after Gibbie was away, greeting it and looking for him. Robert gave a great sigh, but said nothing, so he knew, right, not to worry. Janet did not sleep a wink that night. She had so many to pray for. Not Gibbie only, but every one of her family was in perils of waters, all being employed along the valley of the Dower of this river, right? It was not, she said, confessing to her husband her sleeplessness, that she was afraid. She was only keeping them company and holding the yet open. So she called it holding the door open. It's this door of heaven. She's standing in the crack of this door praying for all her children. Gibbie as one of them. They adopted Gibbie. She was only keeping them company and holding the yet open, she said. The latter phrase was her picture paraphrase for praying. She never said she prayed. She held the gate open. The wonder is but small that Donald should have turned out a poet, right? Donald is a poet, of course, and she calls praying just holding the gate of heaven open for her children, right? Or for anyone. The dawn appeared, but the farm had vanished. Not even heads of growing corn were anywhere more to be seen. The loss would be severe, and John Duff's heart sank within him, all their crops for that year. The sheep which had been in the mown clover field that sloped to the burn were now all in the cornyard, and the water was there with them. If the rise did not soon cease, every rick would be afloat. There was little current, however, and not half the danger there would have been had the house stood a few hundred yards in any direction from where they were. Take your breakfast, John, said his sister. His sister is Jean, right? Let them take it that's hungry, he answered. Take or you'll have it with to save, said Jean. Thereupon he fell to and ate, if not with appetite, then with a will that was wondrous. I'm hungry too, huh? The flood still grew, and still the rain poured, and Gibbie did not come. Indeed, no one any longer expected him, whatever might have become of him, except by boat. The main was inaccessible now, they thought. Soon after breakfast, notwithstanding, a strange woman came to the door. Jean, who opened it to her knock, stood and stared speechless. It was a gray-haired woman with a more disreputable look than her weather-flouted condition would account for. Just the weather, anyway. Grandwither for the something. Anyway, she said, "Where did you come from?" returned Jean, who did not relish the freedom of her address. She's basically saying, "Can I come in?" From over by, she answered. And how was you here? Upon my two legs. Jean looked this way and that over the watery waste, and again stared at the woman in grown bewilderment. They came afterward to the conclusion that she had arrived, probably half drunk the night before, and had passed it in one of the outhouses. Your legs must be longer than they look, woman, said Jean, glancing at the lower part of the stranger's person, right? Because the waters were up and she wasn't wet. I'm gonna end here for now. Let me see, unless there's one more page of this chapter. No, there's more. All right, so I end on the right side so that I remember where I ended usually. And some of these have gone over a bit. All right, so we're still in the rainstorm, and you'll see who this is. If you've been with us, then you'll recognize her perhaps soon. All right, I wish you so much love. Thanks for being here. Make sure to like all the videos you see on this channel and share them and stuff like that with like-minded, like-souled people. Much love.